Hi everyone, welcome to the MrpTech Podcast. This is episode 65. My name is Matt, and this is the weekly podcast discussing everyday tech for everyday people. Sorry guys, it's been a while, and it's been a couple weeks now since I've been able to release a podcast. I did give you guys warning that it would probably take me a couple of weeks to get another episode out, seeing how I'm going to start a new summer supervisor position at my summer job. And so that's been keeping me pretty busy over the last few weeks, and haven't really been able to get on the microphone to talk about a podcast recently, but I haven't disappeared yet. And as I mentioned before, once September rolls around, I'll be back to the weekly schedule here on the MrpTech Podcast. So basically the last few weeks have been really kind of fun. They've been really hard work. It's been real rewarding work. And I did try to post a message out to everyone just to let them know that I was still around, that I hadn't gone anywhere, and that I just been really busy. And it's not like my normal type of busy. I'm usually extremely busy, and I'm really doing a lot of mentally challenging things. This summer's job is much more physical in that respect. So basically, here's the thing. I work at a tourist attraction in the summertime. I've been there since 2002, and I've done a lot of different things there. I just enjoy the place. It's a 2-mile long canyon, and I just really enjoy being outdoors. I enjoy the fresh air. I often joke that my classroom doesn't have any windows. Because I'm a music teacher, they put me sort of in the bomb shelter, and so I don't get to see the sun from September to June. So during the summers, I like to be outside. And so this year, I sort of took over a supervisor role, and basically the operation that I work in has a lot to do with a rafting operation that goes through this canyon, and it's a lot of manual labor. Basically, I'm moving 250-pound rafts and dealing with a large flow of amount of people, and that's the best part about working there, is getting to meet people from all over the world. Basically, over the last few weeks, I've met people from Scandinavia. I've met people from the Midwest. I've met people from England, people from Russia, people from Israel, Canada, all over the place. And it's a whole lot of fun to meet people from all over, and realize that we're all basically the same. And so at the end of every day, I am completely spent and just completely exhausted. And so on top of that, we've had a few weddings to go to, and a few other commitments as well. And so it's been real busy over the last few weeks, and just wanted to give you an updated episode here to talk about some of the things that I mentioned last time. Now, if you missed the last episode 64, where I discussed the Atlas missiles, you may want to just hit pause on this one, go back and download episode 64. You'll sort of be caught up to speed as far as everything that I talked about in the last episode. So in the last episode, I talked about my area that I grew up in, being part of a strategic Air Command base in upstate New York. And with that, there were Atlas missile silos built around this area in a 50-mile radius, basically, of this strategic Air Command base. So I went into the story of the missile silos themselves, how they were built in the 1960s, and how they were shut down several years later because the Atlas missiles were volatile, and basically just went into disrepair after just a couple years, and many millions of dollars being spent on these projects. So then I went into a story about a silo, in one silo in particular, that was sort of purchased in sort of a little bit of mystery and controversy. And I encourage you, again, to go listen to that. So over the last few weeks, especially in the beginning of July, what I did is I started doing some research on these silos themselves. And I went and I sort of tracked down where all of these 12 missile silos were located. And I knew of a couple of different locations of them, but I didn't know where most of them were. And that seems to be the general consensus with everyone that I talked to, is that they were sort of built nearby, but nobody really knew where they were built unless you actively go looking for them. It's easy to find them if you know where to look, but most people don't know exactly where they are. They're built on about anywhere from 5 to 20 acres of land, and they're usually off of a main road somewhere, but they usually have a long road leading up to the silo, so you can't actually see much. So again, what I did is I started to go and take a look at where these silos were, and I actually visited some of them. So as I mentioned, these silos were run down. They're basically closed down. The military left very quickly and really went into disrepair fairly soon. And many of the silos, they filled up with water and became just completely unusable from any respect. So the property started to be sold off to local governments and basically the highest bidders of many different auctions, and you could actually buy one of these silos relatively cheap. Some of the silos were sold for $10,000. Some of them were sold for $150,000, depending on what they were used for afterwards. But many of the silos, as I kind of went and did some research, some of the silos turned into junkyards. Some of the silos were sort of taken over by county or state highway departments, and basically they paved over the top of the silo and just used the land. And one silo in particular in Vermont, they actually pried the doors, the big blast doors open, and this was used as like a junkyard, and they actually have gone in the silo and started cutting away steel. And so whenever they're slow on business, they sell the steel back to make some money. And so I thought that was a kind of a cool idea. Another missile silo in Vermont basically has just been purchased to become a huge solar farm for obviously solar energy. And that building project is still kind of underway. And in this whole process, I contacted, and I wanted to find out who owned the silos, because I really wanted to go visit one. And rather than just show up on somebody's property, most of these silos, they are private property. And obviously the owners of the land don't want many people kind of just walking around. But what some people do is they ask permission. And so there was a couple of silos that I just kind of wanted to go and take a look at the property, see what they were all like, because as I mentioned before, all the silos are basically cookie cutter the same examples of each other. So one thing that I did, I did some research and I found the owners of the silos, and one particular silo was turned into an art gallery at one point in time. There used to be huts on the outside of this, on the above ground portion of the silo, called Quonset huts. And basically, there was a vet that bought the land and turned into a photography gallery. And I thought that was kind of neat. I was a few years too late on the information that I found. And this vet, who was shortly disabled after opening this gallery up, really didn't want too many people around. He was getting rather old and very sickly, and so I just kind of decided, I don't really want to visit one of the, that particular silo. I don't really want to cause him any more stress or anything like that. So I started looking elsewhere. That was one of the ones that were closer by to me. I grew up and also went to a high school that was very close by to a missile silo. Within a couple of miles from my high school, there was a missile silo. I had always heard about it, but never really visited the area in itself. And so I tried to find the owner of that. Well, I did come across an owner of a missile silo, and I'm going to put the link in the show notes in case you're interested. But this guy, he actually works for, I believe, the American Red Cross. And he purchased a missile silo in Champlain, New York, which is right near the Canadian border. Literally, you cannot go any farther north in New York without hitting the border. And the missile silo is probably a quarter of a mile, maybe a half a mile from the border itself. And so this guy, he goes by the name Fitz, and he is currently renovating the missile silo in Champlain. Wants to turn it into some sort of historical house, build a house or some sort of something similar to that. And from the information that I've gathered, and he's put together some really entertaining YouTube videos on his work inside the silo. He's been working on it probably about 10 years now. And I'm going to put some of this stuff in the show notes in case you're interested. So basically, when he started, the silo was completely filled up with water. And he drained the entrance to the silo and was able to get into the launch control center. And from that point, he just began to pick away at any buildup of corrosion and rust, and just pressure washed the whole control center, and went in, and he's actually got videos of him trying to jack open the blast doors with several 50,000-pound jacks. Made some progress just to get air in the silo. And so I thought it was a cool idea, and I wanted to go and visit the silo. And I actually, the first weekend in July, made an attempt to actually go see the silo. Scheduled the time to go see it, and unfortunately, I got called into work because it was a holiday weekend, and I could not make it to the silo. So we planned on doing the next weekend, and again, shortly thereafter, just plans kind of got messed up and wasn't able to make it to the silo again. But I do have plans of getting there this summer. And really, at first I wanted to take a tour through the silo itself. But then I came across some interesting information regarding lead contamination and really volatile chemicals that were used with the missiles. And if the Army Corps of Engineers hasn't been to that particular silo, then it can be really dangerous for you to go inside. Obviously, he's been working on it for 10 years, and so thus far has no adverse health effects, but really just didn't really want to go inside the silo to a point where I was going to get exposed to lead and PCBs and that type of thing. There's also another chemical that I'm drawing a blank on that's really dangerous. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, and so I'm sorry about that. So I am going to visit the grounds of the silo this summer. Next time he's actually in town, I'm going to contact him. I'm going to visit the silo and just take a walk around and see what it's like, because it's really cool to visit a Cold War relic. And I really wish somebody would take one of these and turn it into some sort of tourism site, fully restore the silo. I know it would take a lot of money, but there's got to be some interest, for that particular type of atmosphere, I would say. So basically, these YouTube videos, they have been, it's a great website he has that talks about the restoration process, and several other silos, including the Lewis silo that I talked about in the last episode, which happens to be, by the way, the silo that I talked about, that was sort of built and purchased in secret, owned by a company with the name Unconventional Concepts now. That particular silo was purchased for $750,000 this time around, and that was just a couple years ago, and the property itself now is estimated at a value of about $3 million. And that to me says, after I did some research since my last episode, that most of the time when you buy these silos, you probably put them up for sale immediately so that you own them for a few years and sell them. So it either tells me that they have done an extensive amount of work inside the silo to make it worth that much money, from $750,000 to $3 million, or they're just reluctant to really sell, and they put in a price tag that was well above what they're expecting. So they're either expecting somebody to give them lots of cash quickly to sell and move on to another project, or they're planning on being there for a while and just don't want to sell the land and put a high price tag on it. So a lot of the silos in the area actually are for sale and constantly looking for new ownership. And that's a good thing in some respects because some of the owners are getting up there in age and maybe not so able to come down to their site and give a tour or something like that. So if somebody new purchases the land, maybe they would actually care about what's under the ground rather than above the ground. Some of the silo owners don't even really care that there's a missile silo underneath where they're standing. Just want to use it for the land or the power lines that show up to that particular site. And an interesting kind of fact about the Lewis silo that has been sort of shrouded in mystery, if you want to call it, over the last few years, is that now currently with all the upgrades that have been given to that place, it's the most sophisticated and electronically advanced property in the whole county where it lies. And I thought that was really interesting to find that out. So in this process, I sort of took a trip along the Canadian border and up through upstate New York and then into Vermont itself. And I noticed, and I do this trip quite often, actually, to be honest with you. And in this process, I've noticed recently, as being a ham radio operator, that there are many new antennas that have been put up over the last year near the Canadian border. And I was actually interested, just because I became a ham radio operator, that these antennas all point in the direction of the border crossing, and these huge antennas that are 60 feet tall. As you cross a bridge into Vermont over the lake, there are now video cameras set up monitoring traffic, and it interests me because a while back we talked about the TV show, I believe it's called Hunted or The Hunted, where it's a sort of a game show and you have to evade law enforcement type officials using modern technology with video camera access and ATM access and all those different things. But in this case, places where I've lived that that have been relatively left alone are now being monitored by Border Patrol. I just thought it was really cool over the last few months becoming a ham radio operator and understanding line of sight with radio, how all these towers were in a straight line and basically gave access for Border Patrol up near the border to better monitor that area. And all this kind of fit in right with the whole missile silo theme that I've been working on. So basically, I visited, I believe, 3 silos at this point of the 12. I looked into about 4 more to go visit. And the idea behind visiting them is just to learn a little bit more about the area and the history in this area. And I'm going to keep you guys informed if you'd like. I can kind of keep you going and tell you what I find. I did find there was a missile silo that I think I mentioned that my father had actually gone and taken a tour through doing some work on this site, and has a house that's built on top of it. So I contacted that owner. He's currently renting that silo, or the house above the silo, out right now, so I couldn't take a tour there. So certain areas and certain silos I've been able to actually make some progress in visiting, and certain silos are sort of blocked off from general public use at this point. So I'm making progress on this, and it's going to become sort of a side hobby when I have time and sort of addressing and just kind of learning about these silos. I'm still very concerned about some of the things I mentioned in the last episode about the Lewis silo, but I certainly understand why it would research on anti-terrorism measures is very important. So at the same time as I'm kind of doing all of this, on my way to work, I've been sort of reading a very entertaining book, and I wanted to mention it here in case some of you are interested in sort of Cold War era government operations, let's just say. And this is a story of a place called Raven Rock, which is an underground continuation of government facility. And so the audiobook that I've been listening to, it's a very entertaining name, Raven Rock, the story of the U.S. government's secret plan to save itself while the rest of us die. And don't let the name really fool you all that much. But basically it goes into the Cold War era. It does mention the Atlas missiles in this book. It does mention basically something called continuation of government in the case of nuclear war. And it goes all the way from the very beginning of the Cold War all the way past September 11th into the modern last 2 or 3 years, actually, I should say, of what the government has done sort of underground and for Congress, for the executive branch, the judicial branch, the military. It was a really interesting topic to read about, seeing how I was just interested in the missile silos themselves. And actually, they did mention Plattsburgh Air Force Base in this book, which I thought was really cool. Because you're obviously reading a book and then you hear something about your hometown. It's kind of cool. So the idea behind this book is I just kind of want to learn a little bit more about the Cold War, and it actually was a great book. I really recommend it if you're interested in Cold War. So again, Raven Rock, and it's written by Garrett M. Graff, Graff, and narrated by Jakes Roy, Roy. It's about 18 hours long, and I just finished it this morning, actually, so it's perfect time for a podcast, and certainly recommend it if you're interested in that stuff. So with that said, I've given you an update kind of on what I've been doing over the last few weeks. Not sure exactly when I'm going to get on the microphone again. Hopefully I'll be able to in a week or so, or 2 weeks. But if you don't hear from me again, don't panic. I'm not going anywhere. I appreciate the comments that you've all been giving and the understanding that I've been receiving in comments and in messages. Understanding that my schedule just changed just for a sort of the summer, and I hope to get on here again real quickly for you all, because I really enjoy doing this. If you have any questions or comments, one thing that I have been doing, I did check out, was called Andy's Ham Radio Linux. Andy's Ham Radio Linux. A while back, I did an episode on SDR Radio and reviewed Skywave Linux. So I wanted to take a look at Andy's Ham Radio Linux. Had some software that I was familiar with. I wasn't real impressed with the choice of desktop environment. I believe it was OpenBox. I could be wrong. Could be something similar. I'm going to start getting into that stuff again for you all. I actually recently acquired a Raspberry Pi. That was kind of fun. Raspberry Pi 2. Haven't had a chance to work on it. It was a gift from my brother-in-law who happened to find one for me. So that was a big thanks to him. And so basically, I got a few projects coming down the pipe, and I'm really excited to start messing with that Raspberry Pi a little bit. And also getting back into reviewing some things as far as Linux is concerned. Once the July has been really busy. The first week of August is really busy for me as well, but after that I think it slows down for a little bit, so expect some episodes out there as well. So thanks everybody for listening. I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and we will see you next time.